Hello friends, welcome to the class. For a change, let us try and imagine a situation where everything that we think, we feel, we do is controlled by others. Everything that we have to do is predetermined, and there are people to tell us what to do, when to eat, when to sleep, what to wear, how to think or how to feel. Terrible, isn't it? Well, let us bring in one more aspect. All these choices that are being made for you are not really bad. The only thing is that you don't have any choice of making any decision in your life. Still terrible, isn't it? Yes, this is because we as human beings have a fundamental and inherent need to exercise at least a substantial degree of control over our lives. And according to psychologists, an absence of this opportunity to control our lives can lead to a significant amount of distress. Since the beginning of the human race, the survival of human beings has depended upon this opportunity of controlling their environments and using one's reasoning in the process. Hence, when human beings are placed in situations where they can exercise very little control over their environments, it is natural that they will feel distressed and they will try hard to regain this control over the environment. And when they are unable to achieve this, they may face a significant amount of anxiety, distress and apprehension. Loss of personal control at any age or in any situation can in itself be a source of stress. Moreover, environmental situations are perceived as more stressful when they give the individual very little opportunity to control it. The extent to which an individual can control his or her environment can depend upon a number of factors. These may include physical factors such as age or disability. These may also include psychological variables such as personality variables. Further, it can also include other reasons such as ethnicity and culture. Psychologist Taylor in 1983 put forward a theory of cognitive adaptation to stressful situations. There are three major themes in this theory. The first involves a search for meaning in the stressful experience. The second involves gaining a sense of control over the stressful experience. And the third involves building up a sense of self-enhancement and feeling positive about oneself despite the setbacks the stressful situation may give you. A vital aspect in this theory is the gaining of a sense of control. Because this very search of meaning in a stressful experience is directed towards gaining a sense of mastery and control, to tell yourselves that yes, I have found meaning even in this adverse situation and yes, I am in control. Similarly, gaining of a sense of control automatically leads to the third theme, that is self-enhancement. Once you know that you are the master of the situation, you feel good about yourself, you feel positive and you feel that whatever the stress may be and however big it may be, I can face it. Sudden threatening events no doubt may weaken drastically the individual's sense of control. But what is most important for us is to regain this sense of control, to gather ourselves together and to deal in positive and constructive manner with the stress that we are experiencing. Gaining a sense of control can be achieved in two ways, by using behavioral techniques or by using cognitive techniques. Firstly, let us have a look at what are the cognitive techniques of gaining a sense of control over a stressful situation. Cognitive techniques generally involve what is called mental control by psychologists in recent times. According to Wegner and Pennebaker, mental control occurs when people learn to suppress a thought, to inhibit an emotion, to quench a craving, to maintain a mood, or to stir up a desire, and in some way control what they are feeling and what they are thinking, a mental and emotional control and self-regulation. Now, how do cognitive techniques help us to gain a sense of control? The thing is that cognitive techniques can help us inhibit certain unwanted or undesirable thoughts and emotions that cause us a great degree of distress. Further, It can help us build up a sense of emotional self-control. For instance, we can maintain a state of being happy and enthusiastic. And in such ways, it can help us in our social interactions with others. For instance, we can make a better impression on people by remaining enthusiastic, happy, and vital. Thus, cognitive control can help us regulate our thoughts and hence regulate the way we see a stressful situation and also regulate the way we cope with it. Now we go over to the different forms of cognitive control. There are actually 5 forms of cognitive control, and it is a very interesting concept. The first of this is cognitive distraction. This involves a conscious distraction of attention from the pain or anxiety or discomfort that a stressful situation produces. Now let us take the hospital setting. A person who is undergoing painful treatment for cancer such as chemotherapy can experience a great deal of well-being if he focuses on some other aspects rather than the nausea, the pain and the chills that accompany chemotherapy. For instance, he can think of what all he can do in the future, or he can imagine being in a more pleasant atmosphere, and he can make plans for the future. Such an attention on something else that is interesting and positive will to a great deal reduce the experience of pain, anxiety and distress associated with the medical procedure and even aid recovery. A second cognitive technique is cognitive restructuring. This involves consciously attending to certain aspects of the environment and consciously blocking off certain other aspects. For instance, again take a hospital setting. A patient can fare much better if he attends to other aspects of the hospital setting, such as the clinical procedures, the clinical atmosphere, how the doctors and nurses are interacting with each other and such other aspects, rather than focusing on the pain or anxiety that he is experiencing during the clinical procedure. A third technique is thought stopping. It is a direct technique and telling the thought which is unwanted, which is repetitive, which is intrusive and distressing to stop entering your conscious awareness. Whenever the thought enters, you tell it that yes, this is distressing, this is irrational, and so you have no place in my conscious awareness. The fourth technique is thought avoidance. Avoiding thinking about certain things which are bound to create distress. For instance, again, I'm going back to a hospital setting. You have to have a surgery. You don't have any other option and you're afraid of surgery. So it will be much better for you if you avoid thinking about the pain or the discomfort or the kind of debilities that you are going to suffer during the surgery or after the surgery. Better avoid thinking about these aspects and you will be able to handle the surgery and its after effects well. A fifth cognitive technique of gaining control is informational control. You must have experienced even in your daily lives that those aspects of the environment that are unknown are bound to be more distressing. Again, I'm going back to a hospital setting. For instance, a patient who is suffering from a disease, most of them don't have any idea of the implications the disease may have in their lives. Providing them information regarding what the disease is about, what are the treatments, what will be the expected procedures and consequences, at least some form of information, will give them a great degree of control. They will feel that they are not just passive organisms in the hospital setting, but have at least some degree of control over what is happening to them. Apart from these cognitive techniques of gaining a sense of control, there are also a wide variety of behavioral techniques that people use to gain a sense of control over their environment. Behavioral techniques for gaining a sense of control involve enacting specific behaviors that are meant to modulate environmental situations. Many a time, individuals may enact certain behaviors which are meant to modulate at least minor or at least a bit larger aspects of the environment, even if they cannot control the entire situation. However small these changes may be, which are brought about by behavioral techniques, but they provide a great sense of control to the individual. They contribute greatly to reducing the sense of distress and anxiety experienced, and hence enable the individual to face the stressor in more constructive and positive ways. For instance, in the medical setting, allowing the patient small choices, for instance, if a music is going on, allowing him to adjust the volume of the music, or teaching him to relax his muscles during a treatment procedure, or allowing him some sort of control, for instance, teaching him to swallow during endoscopy, can contribute a great deal towards helping him gain a sense of control over the medical procedures. Similar studies by other theorists such as Langer and Rodin revealed a great degree of improvement in the physiological as well as psychological health and well-being of nursing home residents, that is, geriatric residents of the nursing home, when they were given control over making small choices. For instance, how the furniture should be arranged or what kind of leisure or entertainment activities they would prefer. Even such small choices contributed a great deal in bringing about both physiological as well as psychological well-being. For both cognitive as well as behavioral techniques of gaining a sense of control to work, it is necessary that a conducive environment, that is an environment which gives an individual maximum opportunity to control it, as also the existence of personality variables that are conducive. For instance, an internal locus of control or the belief that you can control your environment. These environmental factors and personality factors play an important role in determining how an individual or how effectively an individual will be able to use these behavioral and cognitive techniques of gaining a sense of control. Now let us go over a special situation. In certain chronic or severe stressors, take the case of cancer, a sense of control, especially when it is over certain situations which are objectively uncontrollable, comprise illusions of control. It is not an actual control, but they are just illusions of control. But however, psychologists believe that even such illusions of control are quite advantageous, and a really skillful person is one who will allow such illusions of control to develop, who will nurture them and use them to his advantage to aid recovery and to help him and to give him the willpower to go through the difficult treatment. However, a downside of such illusions of control are that they can be easily broken, they can be easily rendered false. For instance, a recurrence of the disease, for instance, cancer coming back in patients who are in remission, or information provided by any knowledgeable person such as a doctor regarding the prospects that a patient has, can actually totally disintegrate these illusions of control and lead to further adverse consequences. Perceived control can be defined as the individual's perception that he or she can take action in a situation so as to get desired outcomes, or that he or she has the ability to change the course of an event or a situation to one's own favor. Perceived control is a powerful resource in dealing with stress, and psychologists believe that perceived control can go a long way in helping the individual gain better emotional as well as physiological well-being, as also can help him deal with the stressors in ways that are constructive and cope with the stressors even if they involve a change in behavioral patterns which are difficult. In all its forms, perceived control, whether it is in the form of causal attributions or in the form of self-efficacy or in the form of locus of control or in the form of perceived competence, in all these forms, perceived control can play an important role in dealing with stress. Perceived control consists of two major components. The first is the locus of control and the second is self-efficacy. Individuals can differ in the amount of perceived control that they possess based on their locus of control, the extent of self-efficacy that they possess, or other factors such as age, gender, ethnicity, culture, and such other factors. Julian Rotter's scale of measuring perceived control in terms of the internal or the external locus of control was a pivotal event that provided a great impetus to the psychological research in the field of perceived control. Rotter theorized that people tend to be distributed along a continuum with regard to perceived control. There are individuals who possess either an internal locus of control or an external locus of control, and the locus of control that an individual possesses plays an important role in how he appraises the stressful situation and how he deals with stress. People with personality patterns having a high locus of control tend to believe that they in fact can influence and control environmental events and modify them in their favor. And since they believe that they have mastery over the situation, they also tend to engage in active coping mechanisms in dealing with stress. On the other hand, people with an external locus of control tend to believe that they have little mastery or control over the event, and all their life circumstances and life events are being controlled by factors such as luck, fate, chance, or other people. Since people with an external locus of control believe that they have little mastery over the situation, they are more likely to engage in avoidant or escapist coping mechanisms, which can in fact be a risk factor for a number of diseases as also health risk behaviors. In fact, researchers have found a consistent relationship between an external locus of control and alcoholism, both in pleasant and unpleasant situations. And when alcoholism occurred in stressful situations, it was often the avoidant coping mechanism that the individual adopted in response to stress. Since individuals differ a lot along the locus of control as also possess differing levels of self-efficacy, the levels of perceived control vary from individual to individual. Further, depending upon the nature of the situation, the perceived control that an individual experiences may also vary from one situation to the other. Now we come to the second component of perceived control, which is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy can be defined as the individual's perception of his ability to enact a particular action so as to gain a particular end. Since self-efficacy determines an individual's feelings of adequacy and his confidence in getting things done, it can have an important role in the appraisal of the stressor by the individual, as also in what kind of coping mechanisms or techniques that he engages in. People with a high level of self-efficacy believe that they can get things done and they can employ effectively coping mechanisms that are necessary to deal with the stressor. And hence, like people who have a higher internal locus of control, they also engage in active and direct coping mechanisms. On the other hand, people having lower levels of self-efficacy believe that they would not be successful in engaging in any kind of activity that involves coping with the stressor, and hence, like people having an external locus of control, they are more likely to engage in avoidance tactics and escape from the stressor. Thus, perceived control depends on the extent to which the individual feels that he or she has the power to control the situation, that is the locus of control, as also enact activities that are involved in controlling the situation, that is self-efficacy. Since the locus of control and self-efficacy differ along varying situations, as I have mentioned earlier, individual differences in perceived control are also observed. Now let us examine the role of certain other factors such as gender, age, ethnicity, and other individual differences that play a role in perceived control. A number of theories and research studies predict that women possess a lesser degree of perceived control as compared to men. And researchers seeking the reason behind this paradigm put forward that women across ages and across societies have experienced powerlessness and have been dominated upon. They have had very little economic independence and autonomy and have often been engaged in routine, dull and boring sequences of work both at the workplace and in the family, and have always received very little recognition and appreciation for their services. This extreme powerlessness that women have been subjected to often makes them believe that they do not have enough resources or enough abilities to control or modulate a situation in their favor, thereby leading to a lesser degree of perceived control. However, certain other research findings indicate the contrary. They believe that, at least in certain settings, men and women have equal degrees of perceived control. However, all the researchers have not been able to put forward consistent findings that tend to elucidate on the reasons for this. They generally believe that women who have a greater degree of economic or financial independence and a greater degree of autonomy in making choices tend to have a greater degree of perceived control. We come to the second factor which influences perceived control, and that is age. A number of researches have been conducted on this very topic and have yielded contradictory and inconsistent results. Many researchers believe that perceived control tends to decrease with age. A research study conducted by Mirowsky in 1995 involving a very large representative sample consisting of people from the age group of 18 years to 90 years found that not only are older individuals possessing a lesser degree of perceived control, but also that perceived control continues to progressively decrease with age. However, another important finding is that as compared to adults and other young people, perceived control is of greater importance in old age and can play an important role in preventing geriatric depression and anxiety. Now we come to the third aspect, analyzing the role of racial and ethnic and cultural factors in perceived control. Researchers find that people belonging to certain cultures and ethnicities that have long been socially disadvantaged and marginalized, for example the African Americans or the Asian Americans when compared to non-Asian Americans, tend to have a lesser degree of perceived control. The reasons are somewhat same as we have discussed in the case of women. Throughout ages and throughout centuries, they have experienced both psychological and economic subjugation. They have experienced discrimination as also stigmatization, which have rendered them powerless not only physiologically but most importantly psychologically. And this prevents them from developing an adequate degree of perceived control. One premise that we can conclude from this is that the availability of resources, both physical such as health, material resources, education and the like, as also psychological resources, plays an important role in how good a degree of perceived control we develop. Since the availability of these resources differs from community to community, differs across genders and differs even across individuals, individuals differ from each other vastly in the amount of personal control that they exercise. Now, as we come to the end of this chapter, let us try to review all that we have studied today. Firstly, we have understood that psychological control is an extremely important facet of our lives as active human beings, and that it is extremely essential both for our physiological as well as psychological well-being. Secondly, we have understood that even though certain situations may rob us of our personal control and may render us weaker, we cannot be passive organisms and we have to work towards gaining a higher sense of control and mastery. Thirdly, we have learned that this sense of control and mastery can play an important role in how we appraise a stressful situation, in how we cope with it, and how well we are likely to emerge from a stressful situation. Fourthly, we have also understood that apart from the general differences in the perceived control due to individual differences due to personality variables, age and other factors, there are certain other gender-based as also ethnicity-based differences in perceived control that have existed across centuries. We have noticed the case of women as also the case of certain communities who have been long subjugated and long dominated, because of which they have an extremely lesser degree of personal control. So, it also brings in us a social responsibility to make sure that these marginalized sections, whether ethnically or within the country, are provided those psychological and social resources that help build a psychological feeling of being powerful and of being able to control their own lives. Finally, what you take home from this class is that whenever you face a stressful situation, probably in the beginning you may feel helpless, but work towards having some sense of mastery, either psychological or physiological, over the situation. Once you gain that sense of mastery, you are on the road of recovery from stress.